care issues and politics. He's now the editor of Health Elevations, a quarterly health policy journal. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thanks to all of you for sticking with us one last day. To welcome to all the final day participants, otherwise known as short timers. As you think about what you're doing the rest of the day, driving up over Loveland Pass or taking the lift at Keystone, which is a fantastic thing to do this afternoon, one of our jobs is to make it as hard as humanly possible for you to sneak out early. And we think we've done a good job of that with the speakers that we have today. Amy mentioned one of our goals this morning. There actually is a plan to the program. It's not just a series of random unfortunate events. We have a progression. And we've gone from the first day's progression of trying to connect values to systems. What values do we want to bring into our systems of hospitals, into our systems of insurance, and how can we make sure that we're confirming those values every day and improving those systems? Yesterday we talked about connecting our values to communities and neighborhoods, and we had some amazing speakers talking about that. How do we make sure that we're not just telling communities what to do, that we're listening to them first, and then helping them find their values, and then working along with them to promote those values every day. Today, we're trying to connect values to actions, and our speakers were chosen very specifically to talk about that because of the work that they've done and some of the amazing things they've done out in the world. So we're gonna start with Nancy Lublin, who has done this many times, multiple times in her career, which seems short in some ways, but is so effective in many other ways, in terms of a global view of how to identify your values and sort of use the world as it is, and using technology, which presents this picture of sometimes alluring, but sometimes terrifying, frankly, text, digital information, running around the world at the speed of light. And what can you do with that information and sort it out and use it instead of just complaining about it and complaining about how technology is driving us crazy. Use it to promote your values and do some good for the world. And then we're going to step down a little bit to Dr. Elizabeth Ryder, who has brought her amazing research about interpersonal communication, especially among doctors. And Dr. Ryder will tell you that she's not only a doctor, just as important that she is a social worker, and that fact of interpersonal communication and how important that is still in this digital world, to have that one-on-one conversation, and that you can study it and that you can teach people how to do that better, and you can quantify whether you've done that, is what she'll be talking about today. And then finally, we're going to have Victor Strecker, who has been a successful digital entrepreneur in his own right, a very highly respected academician at University of Michigan, but is setting that aside a little bit today to talk about something very personal that happened with him, and the most significant and horrifying tragedy that can happen to any parent that happened in his life, and how he's tried to use that, translate that into finding what values were important to him despite all the great work that he's done, had he really attached his own values to that work. And then working with us as he sends us out the door today to think about how we can do that with ourselves, and is going to go through an exercise with helping us find the values that are important to us and bringing that to our work. So first, we're going to talk about this thing that we all have in our pockets, in front of us on the counter, that we have kind of an ambivalent relationship with. When you get a text coming in from your son's baseball game, that's a great thing. It's a lot of fun. When I press that button and I look at my email comes up, the first email on my list is from Dr. Rob Lustig, and it's a bit terrifying, frankly, because I'm wondering what he's going to be yelling at us about in this email. Probably a lot. Something that I haven't thought of that's dangerous to me and that I should be doing. So this idea of technology and how we use it, and when we're looking at it, it's a great thing. It brings all this information to us, and we're having fun looking at websites and doing all the things we want to do. That's fun. When somebody else is using it and you're trying to talk to them, your kids, for example, or maybe your spouse, and they're looking at it like this and you're trying to have the conversation with them, it can be incredibly annoying. And you start to wonder, and we should all ask ourselves this question right now. Overall, is this a force of good in the world or a force of not so good in the world? And you can look at it that way, or you could do what Nancy Lubman has done, which is to say, it's here to stay. We've all got it. We're all going to keep using it. So what can we actually do with it that supports our values and takes that out into the world? And it's not the first time she's done this with Crisis Text Line, which she'll be talking about today. Before she had done it, soon after graduating from college, she had a $5,000 inheritance, and there was something else that was bothering her. It was bothering her that when she heard someone say that it's important when you go in for a job interview that the interviewer judges women especially by how they present themselves, how they look. And that seems unfair. Why do we do that? You can complain about that all day. It's going to be very hard to change. So instead of complaining about it, she took this $5,000 inheritance and worked with other people and created Dress for Success, which is a literal closet of clothing that women can come in and use for job interviews. And along with that, because you can sometimes use a lot more than just the dress or the power suit, training on how to do better interviewing, how to become a better, present yourself better when it's such an important thing as a job interview. That wasn't enough. Nancy then moved on when an organization called DoSomething.org was in crisis and needed help. And they had great success up to that point connecting young people who had entrepreneurial social ideas, nonprofit ideas. They were excited about volunteering or starting a new nonprofit, but they didn't quite have all the connections they needed. And DoSomething.org was a social media and digital connection to get them attached to it, but they were financially failing. Nancy came on board with that, got them back on their feet financially. Instead of just saying, you know, we're a failure, how did this happen? She got it back on its feet. As part of doing that work, some of her employees and colleagues with DoSomething.org were using social media a lot and were on their cell phones a lot and using smartphones. And they would see texts come in from teenagers that were strangers to them, but were expressing the most personal and sometimes terrifying information about themselves, about suicidal thoughts or family abuse, things that they were worried about. And they came to Nancy and said, we feel like there's something we should be doing about this. There should be somebody on the other end of this thing that is listening to them with grace, with care, and with knowledge about what maybe they could do next to work on their situation. And so she founded Crisis Text Line to take in all these texts and sort them out, try to connect them with people. She'll tell us a lot more about that. Please do not rush the stage when you see the data that Nancy has available that she's aggregated. I had a glimpse of it back there. It's truly amazing stuff, and I'm sure you guys will have a lot of questions about that. So texting is here to stay. The first text was sent in 1992, and it was sent by a British computer geek from a computer to a nearby cell phone. After thousands and thousands of years of human evolution and thinking about it, all the best message they could come up with for the first text ever was Merry Christmas, which was immediately followed 2 seconds later by the second text, which was, who cares about Christmas? Have you seen those cat videos on YouTube? LOL. And then it just took off from there. Now there are 6 billion texts a day. Is that about right, Nancy? Running around just in the US. And the median amount of text sent by a teenager is 60. So that's the world we're dealing with. What can you do with that world? As much as it drives you nuts when your own kids are doing it, maybe there's some way that can be harnessed. And so Nancy is here to talk to us about using the world as it is for connecting your values to doing something good.
Thank you. Thanks. Hello. So I am not ambivalent about your mobile phone.